Everyone, welcome. Hi, welcome everyone again to day 2 of our Israel forum on our Jacksonville Jewish Community Forum on Israel security and U.S. relations. Our first speaker today is somebody I've known since birth. Was she born here?
She was 4 when
She was really little. Now she's really tall. This is Finley Brownfield. She's been a member of our community since she arrived here, and she's 4 years old. And we're so proud of her. And she is a Stand With Us intern. She just finished her year and was the Stand With Us intern of the year for the Northwest division or territories. She's given some presentations at the Jewish community here on her heritage, and she is heading off to Pitzer College. And it's a frightful world for young Jews who are heading to college for the first time. So she's going to tell us about her experiences and what she's got planned to survive her first year of college.
Yeah,
Here's Finley Brownfield.
thanks, Mary. Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Finley. If you'll see some work that I've done probably all over the JHJC. I have a tile on one of those mirrors from when I was like 8, and I helped make that Torah. I love coming back here because I'm always like, oh, I helped with this little community sign. I think it's really cute. But yeah, thank you, Mary, and just everyone for being here. I'm super excited. I hope everything was good at the panels yesterday. I unfortunately could not make it as I was flying back from Montreal, but I did get to meet Jonathan Conricus, which was really cool because he's like a celebrity in my mind. As I've been in the Stand With Us internship for the past year, which I can talk a little more about. I've watched many live streams that he has been on, and the way he just spoke about everything was so interesting. So it was so cool to meet him in person and have just such a casual conversation with him. And it's like, wow, this is so cool. I've seen you on live stream and now you're here, and like, this feels normal, but like you feel like a celebrity. It was really cool. But yeah, so I'm really happy to be here and to just talk about everything. As since October 7th, there's been a 700% increase in anti-Semitic events on campuses, which is a crazy number, and it's truly devastating. And so as I'm heading off to college in the fall, which comes with a lot of change and new people and new things and new areas, I want to talk about what I've experienced so far on that campus and with the people, and what I've learned and what I hope to bring when I start college in like a week and a half, which is crazy. But yeah, I applied early decision to Pitzer. So Pitzer College is in Claremont, California. It's part of a consortium of 5 other schools. So if you know Pomona, that's a really well-known school. It's one of the schools connected to that. And they're in Southern California. So I get out of long winters for once. And I got to attend the Admit Students Day with my mom just a couple months ago, right after my spring break. And we got there and we sat down and we were at the campus. I was like, this is so cool. Like, this is my school. This is where I'm going. And we sit down and we're eating breakfast, and these students come around and they start giving us pamphlets. And I was like, what is this? And I'm looking and I'm reading them, and it's all about how I'm at a school that's supporting genocide and apartheid. And so immediately I had this blow. I was like, oh my gosh, like, that's not what I wanted the second I get here. And so I end up learning that a lot of the day is going to be protested. I get emails from like faculty telling us to like just be safe, and that these students will be exercising their right of freedom of speech. And so my mom and I go into the first panel that's kind of a welcome, and we're standing in line to look at merch for the school, and we see people come in with keffiyehs and masks and glasses, and they start saying, like, they start chanting, a veto is a vote for apartheid, and all this stuff, because they've been trying to cancel the study abroad at Haifa University, which is in Israel. And basically a lot of the students believe that if you go to Pitzer, you're at a school that supports apartheid and genocide and occupation. And I was immediately just shaken. I almost started crying. I did start crying. I was like, I can't believe this is the school that I'm going to. And so as the day progressed, more protests happened, and my mom and I were separated. There was a parent panel and a student panel. And so my mom's panel got canceled because it got so out of hand from the protesters. I was in mine, and we were just sitting, and people come in and start chanting and had a whole like spiel for about 10 or 15 minutes. And this panel was also led by students. And when they walk out, one of the students leading the panel says, "Can we give everyone a round of applause for the people that got up there and just protested and used their like right of freedom of speech?" And everyone started clapping and cheering. And I just sat there and I was like, wow, like this is happening. Is this where I'm about to be for the next 4 years? Like, is this my future? And it was really scary. And so at the end of the day, there was a kind of like Q&A time to meet people that go to the school and just learn more about the school through the perspective of students. And I was able to meet some Jewish students that just thought the entire day was very disruptive and extremely disappointing. They were also going to the school, but it felt good to know that there was one person that felt the same way that I did. And that was just kind of the start of, hey, you're going to college and this is what your college experience is about to look like. And that was really scary for me. But eventually through Instagram, their Chabad and Hillel reached out to me, and I've gotten welcome packages, which is super cool. And so immediately I did see there's a community for me here, even if it didn't seem like it at first glance. And that was really awesome. And I've also, like Mary said, I've been a part of Stand With Us for the past year. So from August to about June, I participated in the Kenneth Leventhal internship, which is a high school internship for juniors and seniors. And basically, I was flown to LA in the beginning of August, and I was with 150 Jewish teenagers, which was the most Jews I've ever been around. It was a very new thing for me, and I thought it was really, really cool. And for those 3 or 4 days, I was in talks and conferences, and I was talking to people, adults and people my age and people from different backgrounds. And it was just awesome. Like, I immediately felt like this is a group of people that cares and feels the same way that I do. And I have a support system here. And that was also amazing. And that was before October 7th. And so once October 7th happened, everything just spiraled. Like, social media was going crazy. All the people in the internship were like, oh my gosh, we need resources, and Stand With Us swooped in and just gave everyone like what we needed to see. And then when we came back for a second conference in LA again in, I think like April, we learned so much. And that entire internship for me was just such a time of like awakening and learning, and like, this is a time for me to educate myself so I can teach other people and so I can do things with what I know. And that was really great for me. And working with my now friends that live across the country, but I still keep in touch with, it's seriously been so great. And Stand With Us has given me such amazing resources and a support system. If you know anyone that's in high school or in college, they have internships, they have job opportunities, they have such amazing things. Follow them on social media. Like, it's a little preachy right now, but they're seriously awesome. And they provided something for me that I never thought I could have gotten from being in such a small town with such like a small Jewish population. So that was really awesome. And so just this past year, I've experienced protesting and just like a sense of, do I belong here? And then I've had a larger sense of belonging in my internship and everything like that. And so after a lot of thought and reflection, I kind of came up with 3 of my top ways that I'm preparing for college as a Jewish person. And obviously the list could go on, but I wanted to put it at 3 so I could just explain them with the time that I have. So the first one that I thought is really important is prioritizing positive and restorative conversations, because I protests are inevitable at my school. Pitzer College is the #1 school for it's schools that will make a change. They have a super large social justice and social activism realm. And I think that's great until it turns into hate and negativity. And I really like to prioritize conversations that don't turn into screaming matches, but they turn into something where I can empathize and learn from someone else's perspective, and hopefully they can do the same. That's a very optimistic point of view, because I can't say that everyone is going to want to do that and have those conversations. Lots of people start arguments to get reactions out of people, but that's not what I want. And so I want to make sure that if I have conversations with people, they're intellectual, educational, and something that actually gets somewhere. Like if I feel like a conversation is going in circles, that's when I take a step back. I'm like, I'm not trying to change your mind here, but I just want both of us to learn something. And that's how I feel like I want to approach conversations in any realm, but especially with everything that's happening right now and how protests will most likely proceed. I want to know what the protesters feel and what they know. And there's possible things that I can correct, like maybe all your numbers are coming from Hamas, and that's not correct. And let's break down the definition of genocide and apartheid and occupation and kind of figure out the root of things without trying to force any of my views on someone, but more just open up a space to have a restorative conversation. And I think that's really important, because I'm not trying to change anyone's minds, like I said. The second thing that I find really important is finding support systems and using them. So I'm about to be thrown into a completely new part of my life. I'm going to be around so many new people in a new space where I know no one. And that's scary, but it's also a time to make the most of it and find people that agree with me or don't, and know that I have people around me that care. Like I already plan on joining Hillel or Chabad or of some sort, and or going to services, and just knowing that like when you set everything aside, there are people that care for you. And at the end of the day, that you can go to these people. And that also, that still applies here. Like I know that I can always call my parents if I need anything, and that they will always be here no matter what. And that when I need a sounding board, they're there. And my Jewish community is still here. My Stand With Us people are still there. Like even if they're all the way across the country, all the way across the world, wherever they are, they're still there, and they're still there for me. And also at the same time, I want to do the same. I want to be a support system for other people, because the worst thing to feel, especially when you're starting college, is alone and that you don't have anyone. And that is not where I want to be. And I don't want anyone else to feel like they're in that situation either. And the third thing that I thought is really important is when it's necessary to just take a step back and prioritize my mental health. Because at the end of the day, if I'm having so many conversations with people that it gets to a point where I'm drained, it's not going to help either party, because the conversations will stop becoming as productive and I will be tired. And it gets to a point where, as much as I care about being courageous and putting my voice out there and trying to help educate others, if I can't educate myself or take the time to like actually care about myself, it's not worth it. And so, especially in a time, like I've said probably a million times already, being in such a new phase of my life with all this change, it's so necessary to ask myself how I'm doing and if I need anything. And that's when I go back to my support systems, or I just reflect, or I take time to myself. And I think that is really important. So yeah, those are my top 3. I think that everything is subject to change in the next year. I don't know if there are going to be protests the second I step foot on campus. there's a free wall at my school, so basically there's a lot of murals around my school and people can paint whatever they want. And so the entire bottom portion, when I went to see Pitzer in the spring, was filled with, and the occupation, with a Palestinian flag. I don't know if they paint over that. I don't know what's to come, but I know that I have people behind me, and that's what I care about the most. And I know that I have resources to educate myself and others, and that's really what I care about. So, yeah. That's my spiel. Yeah, please, questions, yeah.
So I'm a retired nurse practitioner and I've gone to 3 major university campuses and I serve on a couple advisory committees, so I'm in touch with the university to watch and see all these terrible things happened and how each university handled it.
Right.
And I just, first of all, I wanted to share, I enjoyed your presentation.
Thank you.
You're very courageous. But the student protests, I just feel the other component is the faculty. And
Yeah.
in the news media, there were faculty that were,
For sure.
and so I'm hoping that when you talk about support system, that will occur there too. So I
Yeah.
want to wish you the best.
Thank you.
But I went to University of Wisconsin-Madison, well known, and they call it Berkeley East. Lot of protests. I mean, it got pretty wild in their occupation of the campus, et
Right.
cetera. The University of Colorado had some issues, and then, of course, the University of Wyoming, where I went, interestingly enough, they did have quiet protesting,
Mhm.
but it has to be difficult.
Right, yeah, for sure. I mean, Pomona College, one of the like sister schools, earlier in the year, they had 16 students like arrested and detained for occupying the admission building, which caused a lot of uproar. I'm in a group chat on Instagram with a bunch of incoming Pitzer students. I'm not sure how I got on it, but all of that, once that happened, posts, like there's a super large group of Jewish Voices for Peace at my school, which is a lot of Jewish people that are pro-Palestinian and just pro-Hamas, unfortunately, even though they say it's not like that, but that's what it comes across as. And so once that happened, everything spread like wildfire. They're like, they can't arrest students. And I was sitting on a plane with my mom thinking, but they can, because they were trespassing. And it gets to that kind of whole like idea that when is free speech too much and when does it become hateful and challenging and interruptive.
Other people's right.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think the president of Pomona, Gabby Starr, she handled everything really well, and she had a lot of statements, and half of the people that were occupying that building also didn't even go to Pomona. Many of them were Pitzer students or other students or people that didn't even go to the school. And so she had said, like, you won't be welcome on this campus again. And that was a similar thing too during the Pitzer protests. Half of the students weren't even from Pitzer. They were from other schools. And but they were all there to show that there was a massive backing to this idea. And I do hope that there are faculty that feel the way that I do. I've yet to find those people, but I also haven't found people that are like aggressively on the other side that are like, you know, saying, let's occupy all the admission buildings and everything like that. But I'm very grateful to start school and have an advisor pretty much immediately. And I know like I said, since Chabad and Hillel have reached out to me, I know that I can contact them, and there are a lot of like adults in that realm that can be super helpful. But it's definitely challenging. Like, it's hard to find the right people because you don't know. Like when we walked around Pitzer, there were people that had shirts that said Jews for Gaza. And like, I'm like, even people that have similar beliefs as me don't feel the same way I do, which is fine. But sometimes it seems like an ignorance or like a lack of information. Mary, yeah.
I want to talk about here.
Yeah.
So two things. She mentioned faculty, I want to ask about your high school experience.
Oh,
which
yeah,
was at the
sure.
National Community School, my
Mhm.
kids went there too. And just, and your friends around town.
Yeah.
Your friends, have you gotten any pushback? Have you lost friends? Like all of us in the social media world have, hashtag lost friends after October 7th, right? So
Mhm.
tell
Yeah,
us about your local experience.
sure. So right after October 7th, maybe just a couple days after, one of another girl in my grade was like, hey, I would love to do a presentation to town hall, which is when our whole school comes together, all 100 of us, and people do presentations and they talk and everything like that. And it's super cool because everyone's together and it's kind of just a moment to like learn things. And I think that's really great. And so we decided to go, two other Jewish students and I decided to go to some teachers and said we would love to make a presentation about October 7th and just facts, everything that's happened, as non-biased as we can be, but just sharing like some statistics because this is happening all the way across the world. And what I've noticed, especially here for the age group that I know, and like people my age will not investigate or further educate themselves if it doesn't pertain to them. And so we went and talked to a bunch of teachers and we told them like, this is how we want to do our presentation and laid everything out. And I also said very like bluntly, was like, I will be saying that Hamas is a terrorist organization because that's not bias either. Like it's a fact. And so my teacher says, but what if someone will ask if the IDF is a terrorist organization? It's like, I mean, they could, but I'll tell them that they're not. Like, there's kind of like a simple answer to that one. But the way our goal was to only focus on October 7th. And obviously that's extremely challenging because there's so much history behind everything, but it felt like my teachers were trying to get us to give history as a way to validate what was happening. And that was unfair. And so my mom, other parents were making calls to the school being like, you guys trying to validate what's happening, like, isn't okay. And I was also, sure, no problem. Yeah, everyone take a seat, gather round.
Okay, go on up there as you give her a break.
Finley. You'll be new.
Yeah, I think
Campus that is strange and you're not.
Hang on,
know
Cheryl,
everyone.
she's not done yet with her.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's
That's okay, that's okay. I'm getting there. I'm almost done.
Sorry.
That's okay. But I had wanted to talk about certain people that were just kidnapped and like their stories and just how like devastating it was to kind of give like a real perspective of like, this is happening to people our age and younger and older. And I had told my teacher this. And so she sent me an article if I wanted any sort of Palestinian point of view. And I was like, if I give any point of view from Palestinian, it would be that they're unhappy under Hamas rule, which obviously you can't find because that's censored on the media. Like no one's going to actually, like Hamas won't let that information get out. And so she sends me an article about a guy who wrote a book who is Palestinian living under Israeli apartheid. And that was the title of the article from like Independent Now, some weird, unreliable website. And she's a history teacher, by the way. And I sat there, read it with my mom, and was just like, this doesn't make sense. I can't use this. And then the next day, I went and talked to the teacher and my head of school for maybe 2 or 3 hours. I missed most of my classes that day before the presentation. I was like, you can't expect me to use this. This is honestly wrong for you to ask me to use this and just incorrect as well. Like, Israel is not an apartheid state. We can talk about this. Like, I can teach you this if you want to, but I feel like you should know. You've told me yourself, you have taught lessons on Israel and Palestine. Like, this shouldn't be even brought up. And so eventually, even Josh Clayman got involved, and the presentation itself went smoothly, everything was okay, we didn't use the amount of history I used was more of a like regional kind of understanding, being like, this is how small Gaza is compared to everything, and there's a super large and crazy history behind all of this that, you know, is a lot to dig into, but like not the time, because I had like 10 minutes, not even. And so we gave the presentation and it had like okay feedback, but it was also challenging because we could tell that no one our age cared, unfortunately. And it wasn't because like we did anything, it was just because it didn't pertain to them, and that was it. And so we did the same thing. We were like, if you guys have any questions, the next day we're gonna have like an open lunch where you guys can ask anything. We just want to talk. Like, this is also a challenging time for anyone, so we just want to be like a support system for people. And no one came. Like my friends came because they wanted to eat lunch with me. Like, that was it. And it was challenging, but it was also exactly what I expected, unfortunately. Like, my age group has an unfortunate amount of ignorance when it comes to topics that don't rely or that just don't have to do with you. And that's kind of what I've noticed. I haven't lost any friends. I've gotten in one Instagram conversation with someone who's posted a lot of things on their like stories, and I was like, I don't think these facts are adding up. But we got to a point where I took a step back. I was like, let's just agree to disagree, because we'll just keep going in circles and it's not worth it. And so I like I've said, I haven't lost anyone because it doesn't affect them. The people in my life here don't really care about it enough. And as disappointing as that is, sometimes it's better than losing friends, but it's kind of like a hard thing to grapple with, because I was like, I will teach you as much as you want if you're open to learning, but I can tell that you just don't really care. And that's okay. I'm not going to waste my time, but it kind of just sucks. So, yeah.
So, looking forward then
Mhm.
to your upcoming 4 years of Pittsburgh.
Right.
And so I assume you're gonna be in a dorm,
Mhm.
freshman.
Yeah.
Has your RA, I mean, has there been any kind of communication about ground rules for behavior? I'm not worried about,
Mhm.
I'm worried
Right.
about really bad behavior. I have 3 kids of my own.
Mhm.
I mean, the mama bear would have come out. I mean, it's hard enough going off to school, but you feel like you're like a punching bag for a bunch of bullies.
Right.
Is inexcusable.
Yeah. I think I don't know my RA or any of that, so I haven't heard any rules, but I doubt there are many. Pitzer is a extremely like free speech campus, which I think can be good in some ways, negative in others, because like I've said, it could turn to things that are hateful. But I do feel very confident that if I feel something is off, I will report it to someone. Like, and I know that there are those options. Like, there are, like, it's also, even, I would hope, even if an RA agrees with something, let's say like someone does, if it's hateful, like, that should override it. Like, if it's hurting someone's feelings, that should, like, that's when it's worthwhile to get someone involved. So I haven't learned anything yet, but you know, we'll see. I'll take it as it goes.
Hopefully you come back and visit, give us a reason.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, let's keep on with the questions.
Sure.
Harriet, that's serious.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
You go. Oh, I got a tough one, but I'm asking from the perspective of a parent.
Okay.
Alright, any thoughts now, or maybe when you come back in a year? Obviously, you have a very well balanced, in my view, and I think everybody's here, perspective on what's going on and things. What causes some people your age or young people to go in the direction that's much more hateful and much more anti-Semitic, and even, you know, where Jews are going for Gaza and so forth? Do you have any thoughts on that, as to how that develops?
I think that's a good question. I think social media is, it's a huge part. Thanks, Miss Vicky. Social media is a massive part, and I think I was talking to my mom about this yesterday, but misinformation and disinformation is crazy, and it's huge, and I think people my age, including myself, like, we're all extremely susceptible to it, because a lot of the time people don't go past social media. Because things can seem reliable at first, and like, oh, this post looks nice, like it looks really reliable. And maybe they cited it from something, but a lot of people don't move past social media to get their information, and that can be really challenging. I also think that there is a huge tribe mentality, like a lot of, it's easy to follow blindly, especially when you're coming into college and you know no one, and that might be the only way you can fit in right off the bat. And that is unfortunate, but it's like kind of the unfortunate truth. But yeah, that's kind of what I'd have to say. I think it's also like, especially for Pitzer, this is like the first time, like, you're away from your parents, you can do whatever you want. And like, oh, protesting, like, that seems cool, like, I get to like really share my voice and like put myself out there. And unfortunately, that might come off as hateful to other people, and it just may become something that you didn't intend it to be, but now you're in so deep. And now you're only learning one view and one perspective, and you're kind of stuck in this cycle and loop where all you, like, these are your people now, and this is your only group, and that can also be really challenging. That's kind of what I
Just
saw.
one very brief follow-up. Do they teach it all in high school? How to discern what's reliable and not on social media? Is that at all become an educational type?
From my private school education, like, I'd say partly. We spend a lot of time in history class, like in what I did in sophomore and junior year, we did a lot of work with just like once a month we do current event presentations, and so you'd find a current event that's happening in the US or somewhere across like the world, and we would look at it from every perspective. And so we used a website called All Sides, which I think is really great. They take lots of different websites and like news sources and analyze them, tell you what side of the spectrum they're on, how reliable they are, and like all that stuff gets fact checked. And I think that's a really good resource. But I think that it really depends on where you are in terms of like what you're learning. I doubt that a lot of people in my high school, like at the public school, were learning that. But I also think that like they can look at things like they know the big names. They're like, we were always taught in middle school, Wikipedia isn't reliable. I disagree, because you can go and look at the sources in Wikipedia and go back to those. I think those are great.
It's gone all social justice now. Yeah, they are not reliable.
Yeah. I think it depends where you look on Wikipedia and what you find. Yeah. But I think there are a lot of resources that you learn when you're like young, but then you're kind of just, once you're doing your own research, like your own research projects and stuff like that, you're kind of just like thrown into that realm yourself, and you have to kind of determine what's reliable yourself.
Finley, let's everyone give. All right, we're gonna look forward to your updates, all right?
Okay, thank you.
We're all behind you, 100%. Just for all your parents there. It's hot. I love that. It's a hot seat, that's why they can- You didn't have to record. No, I recorded everything. Yeah. Thank you. We don't want you to let me have it. I brought some water. I wasn't good like this.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Let's talk about. It's good to be in Wyoming. It's so nice. This year, DC has been brutal. The humidity, and the temperature doesn't usually get over 100. We've had days of 105, and then you add the humidity onto that. And it's been tough. It was.
I have the laugh now, sorry.
It's very good to see you again.
Well, I want to welcome all of you again. Those of you who were here yesterday, I'm glad you're back. And I'd like to start off by saying that my name is Joan Goldfarb. I think I've met most of you. And we are at the Jewish Community and Centennial Building. And our executive director is Mary Grossman, and her assistant is Brad Adams. And they are hosting us today. And they have for many, many years. As Mary knows, well, 30, well, I even precede you.
Oh, yes, you do, yeah. So
Yes.
pretty-
I don't like to admit it. But anyway, I'm glad, pleased to see all of you here today. I don't mean to have my back to you. Okay, I'm gonna give you an intro. It's my pleasure to welcome back to this group Congresswoman Harriet Hageman. You were here last year. It was
Yes,
your
I was.
first year.
Yes, it was.
The congressman is serving in her first term as Wyoming's lone representative after spending 34 years as a litigator opening her own office. With over a year and a half under her belt representing Wyoming in Congress, Representative Hageman has proven herself to be a strong advocate for the U.S.-Israel relationship. She has supported efforts to push back against Iran and counter their malign activities, and strongly supports Israel's right to defend itself. The U.S.-Israel relationship has been brought to the forefront of Congress's work in a more concentrated way than in the past in her first term. At every opportunity, the Congresswoman has stood unwaveringly by efforts to strengthen the U.S.-Israel relationship. Just a few weeks ago, she attended Prime Minister Netanyahu's address to Congress and stated, quote, "I fully support Israel's fight against the Hamas terrorists that brutally slaughtered nearly 1,200 innocent civilians." She's also recently supported legislation to sanction foreign persons aiding the International Criminal Court, the ICC, for their morally bankrupt and legally baseless attacks against Israel. Congresswoman, thank you for your continued support of the U.S.-Israel relationship, and we look forward to continuing to work with you in the years to come. What we'd like to do is have you give us a little talk about what you hear back in Washington and here, and then we'll open it up to the audience for discussion.
Okay, well, thank you very much. But I was always raised that you step up when you stand up when you address people, and so I am very much used to doing that, and I see several people who are also at the town hall, and I thank you for being here. I thank you for all of the work and the support that you have provided. It is so wonderful to be back in Wyoming. I just can't even describe it. I love what I do. I'm very, very, very honored to represent the state of Wyoming, and I love what I do. And I love Washington, D.C. I know not a lot of people say that, but it's such a beautiful city. And the museums and the history and the art and the Capitol. And I mean, that's our foundation. That's our seat of government. And so I don't tend to criticize Washington, D.C. so much as I criticize some of the things that happen there. But I I have always been very positive when I've been going back to Washington DC, and then when I get to come home to Wyoming, but for some reason, and maybe it was because of what happened with my family's ranch and all of those things, just getting back in Wyoming has been I can't even describe how important it has been this time. I have stood with Israel, and I will continue to stand with Israel. The way that I have described it is that Israel is the tip of the spear in terms of protecting Western civilization. And I think what we saw on October 7th was something that I never thought I would see or experience or witness in my lifetime. I never believed that it could be possible for people to engage in that level of barbarity in 2023 or in a modern society. We can read about Genghis Khan, we know what happened in Nazi Germany, we know what has happened through history, but I think that we all at some point start thinking, well, we're more enlightened than that now. We would never do such a thing. We would never have to witness such a thing. And maybe every 20 or 30 years, we're reminded that there is a level of depravity that we thought we had eradicated. And then we find out that we didn't. And then we find out that there are these pockets of people who want to destroy other people simply because of who they are, who they worship, how they worship, what they think. And I believe that it is absolutely imperative for the future of Western civilization that Israel prevail in this conflict. I was honored. I was honored to attend Mr. Netanyahu's speech. I was honored that I got to talk to him afterwards and get a photograph with him. I thought that his speech was strong. I believe that he gave us a roadmap, and I think that he made it very clear that they are going to have to proceed, because we can't stop until the hatred that was the foundation for what happened that day is no longer exists. One of the things that, as a member of Congress, we were given the opportunity to see the video of what happened that day, the 47-minute video. And there were people who chose not to do that. I was not one of them. I watched the video, and I will never unsee what I saw. And maybe there are some of you in this room who have seen that. And that's why I am just absolutely adamant. There isn't a middle ground here. There isn't a middle ground here. I wish there were. I wish there was a way that we could just, that they could say, okay, you live your life, you do this, you believe in what you believe, we'll live here. That's the end of the discussion. We're just, but that's not where we are. It's not where they are. When they came in with the paragliders and they came in and what they did to the women, what they did, it was just something that we truly have to eradicate off of planet Earth. And I voted for the $14 billion budget for Israel. I have been very angry and quite vocal about the fact that the Biden-Harris administration has been withholding some of those resources and funds from Israel. It isn't their choice to do that. We're Congress. We're the ones that voted to do it. I did not vote for the $65 billion for additional funding in Ukraine. We're not getting any accounting. We don't have a game plan. We know over 50% of that money has gone to paying for things like garbage collection and government services. This last package of money went to border security for Ukraine, which I think is a slap in the face to every American out there in light of what's happened over the last 3.5 years. I didn't vote for the $8 billion for Taiwan, and I would have. I support Taiwan. But that particular provision of the bill said that $8 billion could be, that Mr. Biden could have diverted that $8 billion to Ukraine. And so while that $8 billion is not going to end up going to Taiwan, it will end up going to Ukraine again. And I think we need an accounting. We've done over $170 billion. We need an accounting. We need to know where we are going. And we also need to have a much better understanding of what's the end goal. What does victory look like? How do we know we're winning and how do we know we're losing? But I also believe that it is imperative that America continue to have a strong voice worldwide. I am not an isolationist. I get very, very frustrated with the UN. I think that they misdirect a lot of resources. I think they're far too hard on Israel. In fact, I think that the bias is absolutely stunning. And I think that any organization that would put Iran on the Human Rights Commission tells you everything that you need to know about the moral corruption of that organization. I am not an isolationist. I do believe that a strong America, though, makes for a very safe, a much safer world, and a weak America makes for a very dangerous world. And I think that that is what we are seeing right now. So I think that perhaps the best opportunity now is for me to open it up to questions and really focus on the issues that are the most important to all of you. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know if you had an opportunity, but today in the Wall Street Journal, Mr. Graham had an editorial and he went through his 3 proposals around how to deal with Iran. First was about whoever purchases oil from Iran. The next was anything that Hezbollah does to Israel. It's the same as Iran doing to Israel. And the third was red lines around. So have you been in contact with that or
I didn't see that. We've been you kind of on a dead run today. I don't know exactly what he may be proposing in that regard, but just give you a little bit of history and how I've been watching Iran for an awful long time. I was a junior in high school in 1979. So I remember the Iranian Revolution very, very, very well. And as a young person then, my first reaction, because of what they did to women, my first reaction was, we either deal with them now or we're going to deal with them 50 years from now. So even as someone who had at least had a history, I mean, we understand history, and if it doesn't repeat itself, as they say, at least it rhymes. And you could tell by the nature of the government and what they were doing and who they were, that they were going to be a scourge on society unless we dealt with them. And in the intervening 40 plus years, we never dealt with them the way that they needed to be dealt with. And that's why they have the strength that they do. And that is why under President Trump, they were going broke. And as a result, they didn't have the resources to be funding Hezbollah, Hamas, and these other nefarious terrorist organizations the way that they were. Since sanctions were lifted, they have received over $88 billion in additional oil sales. We've also been sending them money, and we are funding so much of what is happening with Iran because of that. Our own domestic energy policy has fed into that. We are paying them. We know about the pallets of cash from a couple of years ago. We're going to have to deal with that leadership. And the people of Iran, a lot of them do not support that leadership. They don't. And I really wish that if we could have kept those sanctions in place, we might, October 7th never would have happened, number one.
Amen.
And number two, we'd be in a very different place worldwide in terms of funding of terrorism.
So what do you think the thinking of the Biden administration is? I mean, because, they're the ones who led up. I mean, it seems like it goes back to Jimmy Carter not supporting the Shah.
Probably about 10 years ago, I attended a national security policy event in Steamboat. And there was a gentleman there that said, when they tell you death to America, believe them. That is what they believe. I have been mystified. I have been as mystified as probably every single person in this room, why there has been, if not a love affair, at least substantial tolerance for a terrorist organization fronting as a government that has wreaked havoc around the world for 40 plus years, and we continue to allow them to exist and continue to support these other organizations. I don't understand it. I wish somebody would just tell the truth of why they would want to keep those people in positions of power. They're repressing their own people. I mean, what they've done to their own people is a crime against humanity, let alone what they have done to Israelis, what they've done to Americans, what they've done around the world. I don't know why they do it. I wish I did. What do you think?
I don't know. But,
I don't understand it. Yes,
Harriet, I'm writing a song and getting it published, hopefully. It's called Follow the Money. So when the world has turned away from Jesus Christ for so long, money becomes the God. And that's the reason, and that's the answer. It's as simple as that. It's so corrupting when you have no moral compass.
well, I agree. I do. It is, but just think about the overwhelming suffering that has been caused by that.
Money trumps suffering. Give people enough money.
Yes, ma'am. Oh, right here.
And the communist Kamala Harris. Tell me, please, why we have not revoked Alex and George Soros's dual American Hungarian citizenship. Why are they still allowed to operate here?
I don't know the answer to that.
To Israel, sorry, guys, it's our.
Yeah,
You know,
I do, yeah, it's very short talk here, so.
and I,
Only one question is right for Israel.
Yeah, it has to
Well,
be,
okay.
right, Joan?
Yes.
Yes.
In deference to this, I don't know this gal. Source is
Right.
80% of the problem with Israel right now.
has since World War II,
Yep.
and has since World War II. Right. That's how he made his money.
We
So-
do have to keep our questions short because everyone wants to say something and we have limited time.
This gentleman right here.
Your colleagues, Elise Stefanik and Virginia Fox, done some great work. Calling the elite universities into account. I tend to see a direct line between the DEI beliefs that dominate these institutions these days, from DEI to settler colonialism to anti-Semitism. Defunding universities, any degree of federal control is problematic, but something needs to be done. I appreciate your perspective.
I agree.
Question.
And I do. I find that the DEI, what has happened with our universities again, and this is the other thing that makes no sense to me. And I don't know if you've seen the videos. My team gets really frustrated with me, but Code Pink and I do not have a very good relationship. And they're incredibly aggressive. And I'm very aggressive right back at them. And the questions that I ask them is why? Why would you do this? Why would you support this? And it is the same with these universities. I cannot for the life of me understand how they got to the point where they are allowing, first of all, a lot of the people on those campuses are not even students. The people who are creating these encampments are not even students. So they're outside agitators and agent provocateurs, and they're trespassing. And it is clear that they are anti-Semitic. And I guess that they have sliced and diced this in so many different ways that they look at these levels and they try to figure out, okay, who's got the hierarchy here? Who's the one that we have to support here? And they have lost what this gentleman said, which is they've lost their moral compass, they've lost their North Star. But that's why I say over and over again that Israel right now is the tip of the spear for protecting Western civilization because of that very issue. When I was in Washington, D.C. the day last fall that they had that 100,000 people come in, and I was downtown. And they were bussing them in from everywhere. This was not organic. This was not grassroots. And they were all wearing the little black and white scarves. And I'm looking at these kids and they're sitting at these bars and restaurants and they're eating and they're having, maybe a glass of champagne, maybe a glass of orange juice, and they're eating their beautiful food and they're all dressed very beautifully. And they're having these great conversations and they're laughing and they're engaging and they're enjoying. And they walk out of those restaurants and they start spewing hate. And I'm thinking, what is going through your mind? How can you do that? How do you sit here and engage with people across the table, all the wearing the same scarf, of course, but how do they walk out and then start screaming a level of hatred that none of us have in our heart? And the only thing that it comes back to is our education system is failing us. It isn't giving us.
Thank you for being here, especially since I heard that fire took your homestead.
It took part of our ranch and the old house that I was raised in for a while, so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So context for my question is, I was listening to an interview on the way in, and the former prime minister of Israel is apparently in the US. He was interviewed by Brett Baird, and he was asked what should happen now because Hamas and Hezbollah might retaliate for the killing of Hamas leader in Iran. And he said, we have to kill him. We have to win this war decisively. He spoke about a preemptive strike. So my question is, given your sense of what's going on in DC, can Kamala and Joe bumble their way for the next 4 months when we might be involved in a confrontation? What will happen with our military? Do they have a plan in spite of the bumblers in control?
So the way that I have been watching this play out, because it wasn't just the gentleman that the terrorist, the Hamas terrorist that they killed in Tehran, they got another one yesterday. And then there were 2 last week and another one yesterday. That to me tells me that they do have a plan of action. This isn't random. They aren't doing this without knowing what is coming in response. And I think that they are prepared for what is coming in response. The problem that you have with people in positions of power right now, with Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, is that appeasement is the order of the day. Every person in this room knows that appeasement doesn't work. And it's not going to work with Iran. It never has. It never has. And I don't know what they're going to do over the next 4 days. I am a strong, strong supporter of our military. I do not trust our military leadership. I wish I didn't have to say that. But we have people in power that I don't know if they are strong enough to make the right decisions.
Can Congress do anything if the military is fumbling through a catastrophe?
So I think what happened, one of the challenges that we have at this administration is that they are lawless. I have said for a long time that anarchy typically comes from the bottom, whether you're talking about, our American Revolution. That was kind of anarchy at its finest, right? It usually comes from the bottom. What we've been seeing in Washington, D.C. is the anarchy is coming from the top. They simply refuse to follow the rule of law. Student loans is an example of that. No matter how many times the Supreme Court or courts have said, you can't do it, they continue to do it. And that's the problem that we have. We sent $14 billion to Israel. And we have an administration, including the military, who've said, we're not going to send it because we want them to be more precise in how they address Hamas. Well, here's my view of it. Military is there to break things and kill people, right? That's what the role of the military is. I don't care if it's the American military or it is the IDF. I don't care what, that's their job. But that isn't the job that they see that the leadership has been enforcing or engaged in the last several years. I wish I had a more positive answer for you than that. But we are at a crossroads in this country and in this world as to whether we're going to go down the moral road or we're going to go down a road of relativism. And we're going to allow people like allow leadership like Iran and the terrorists to continue to operate. We could have killed them a long time ago. And they need to kill them. Yes, sir.
First of all, I meet with a congresswoman a couple times a year, and I want everyone to know she makes it a priority that means for you, including when you're late and we have to walk with you to Capitol Hill.
Yes, you do sometimes.
So I appreciate that. But my question, when I ask you about an idea, and there's nothing, this is not an APAC idea, it's a flip over, came up yesterday. Would you consider looking into the possibility of a bill that, in light of what this gentleman said about money corrupts, that any college that takes federal funds must disclose all donors over X amount, 10,000, 5,000, you have to disclose political donors. Why not colleges follow the money? Let's see what the problem is.
So there's already, they are not supposed to be taking foreign funds without disclosing it. And many of our universities are in violation of federal law on that very issue. They are not supposed to be taking federal or foreign funds, but they do. The Confucius Institute is an example of where these universities have circumvented that. And I would probably say, if not all of them, dang near all universities in the United States are taking some form of foreign money. And we know that they have been infiltrated by Qatar. Qatar is one of the biggest donors to universities in the entire United States. So you're exactly right. That is a very important issue, and we need to not only force them to disclose it, but when they violate the law, perhaps there needs to be personal responsibility for the people who are failing to disclose the information the way that they should. But there's something else that I think that we need to do with universities. These universities have enormous tax-free endowments, enormous tax-free endowments, yet they are also subsidized, heavily subsidized by the federal government. Even the private universities, because of student loans, because of the grants, because of that. I think that we have the right to ask more questions about what's going on these campuses. I think we were all shocked over the last 9 months what we've seen. I don't think any of us ever thought that was even remotely possible, that we would see this kind of attack on. We know where this goes. We know the outcome when this is the way that people act, when they talk about death to America, death to Jews. We know the outcome of it, and it's not good. And I'm stunned that there is any tolerance for it whatsoever. But let me check more into what the law says right now, and perhaps we can put some more teeth into it, because I absolutely think that they ought to disclose it, because I think that's how our universities are failing.
You having to subpoena, let it automatically.
That's right.
To piggyback on Cliff's, I'm all for them be more transparent disclosing, but I think it's serious consequences, because they have those endowments. I mean, they should have to rely on their own funds, and they should get 1 red cent of federal funding if they're taking money from, I don't know, I'm sick of it.
I'm sick of it.
I'm tired of these little brats screaming obscenities that are so, they're not freedom of speech, they're hateful.
They're hateful.
And we're encouraging this
Mhm.
and funding it.
Well, you all saw Elise Stefanik when she did the questioning.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't think anybody ever thought that those presidents would respond the way that they did, but they have no North Star. They have no moral authority. They have no belief in something, because they're always pitting different people against each other and trying to figure out, how do I slice and dice people, and who comes out on top and who comes out on the bottom. And right now it's the white male that comes out on the bottom. And that's just that's the way that they look at things, because of DEI, because of the way that it has been implemented across the country. I'm going to go back to a few folks that haven't answered questions, and then I'll have a chance to visit with you. This gentleman.
Yeah, you suggested that, it's time for us to deal with Iran. Do you support American troops being involved in this effort?
No, not right now. But what I do support is making sure that Israel has the resources that it needs to address the situation that it's facing in the Middle East. And I do believe that when we become energy independent, and when we cut off their ability to make the $88 billion that they've made in selling their oil and gas around the country, around the world, I think we can have an enormous impact, because we work.
Do you think there's enough political will in Israel, for Israel to attack Iran and take the blowback from the rest of the Arab world without the US full troop level support?
Well, see, I think that's why the Abraham Accords were so important. Because I think that Saudi Arabia is not on the side of the Iranian leadership. I don't think they are. I think Qatar is. I think I think it depends on the country. And I think that the Abraham Accords were so important, and why what happened over the last year, especially, and what has happened with this administration in allowing Iran to strengthen itself, is that with the Abraham Accords, I think we were pushing and nudging the Arab countries closer to the Western society, civilization, as well as to Israel. And I think when we have in some ways abandoned Israel the way that we have and lectured them on their ability to protect themselves, I think that countries like Saudi Arabia looked at that and said, okay, who's going to be my ally and who's going to abandon me? And so there's a lot of layers to this as well. But what you project in terms of being a strong country and what is going to be your North Star can have enormous impacts on your ability to, the work that you do with those countries to make sure that they're making the right decision. So do I think that Saudi Arabia would come in and try to protect Iran as against Israel? I think under the Abraham Accords, and if we had kept that same policy in place, I think they would have stayed more on the side of Israel. But I think because they're a natural enemy of Iran. They're a natural enemy, and they're the biggest ones over there. They're the big dogs, and they also got the most oil reserves.
More money.
And they've got way more money. So I think that the diplomacy and the diplomatic aspect of this has been a terrible failure because of what we have projected when we have come in and undermined Israel's ability to defend and protect itself. Did you already ask a question?
Your other session.
Okay. Okay, I'm not losing my mind. Yes.
I'm going to ask you a legal question, and I'm not a lawyer, so frankly poorly, but I was hoping that, with what's going on campus, the federal courts with a lawsuit saying that there's been a hostile environment created for the Jews and for the employees, as well as the Department of Education would step in and issue orders or something. And do you see that as a viable?
Not the Department of Education. The Department of Education is lost. And I come from a long line of educators. My mom, grandmother, sister-in-laws. My dad was on the school board. My dad was the chairman of the education. Education in my family is very, very important. I have signed on to a bill to abolish the federal Department of Education. It's a state issue. And being a person who received a phenomenal education in a little tiny school in Eastern Wyoming and been able to accomplish what I have because I got a classical education makes all the difference in the world. We know how to teach. We don't need them there. They're not going to do it. Federal courts potentially, but I will tell you, we've had several hearings in the Judiciary Committee and we've brought in students. And to hear their stories of what they have put up with and what they've had to deal with on campus, it will make you cry. I mean, it's rough what these poor students are dealing with. And I think eventually they may very well be successful with those lawsuits, and I hope that they are. But at the same time, we never should have gotten to that. It should have been automatic that they provided protections the moment that the outside agitators started coming in and the moment that they started supporting a terrorist organization that did what they did on October 7th. There is no moral relationship between these two sides. There is no equal, well, you know, you can say this about this. There is no moral relativism when we're talking about what we're talking about and what happened that day. And I think that they allowed too much of that to infiltrate our universities.
I will say, I really wouldn't plan on saying anything, but I was in college football for 45 years, so I've been on college campuses for 45 years. Y'all have no idea what goes on unless you've been on a campus. I'm not sure if anybody else has ever been a professor or a coach or anything. It's the most brainwashing thing I've ever seen. It starts with the president, it's the vice president, it's whoever over every department they hire. I was coaching at one major university here in this country when a group of my players came in and said, "Coach, we just left a history class. We want your opinion." Our professor just told us there was never a Holocaust. It was a brainwashing to make us. It was the brainwash. I looked at him, I said, "You gotta be kidding me." I mean, but that was what was being taught in a history class, that there was never a Holocaust. It's all brainwashed. That's what this professor was telling me. Now, the players knew a little better because most of those didn't come from that type background to begin with. But the other kids in the class fell for it hook, line, and sinker. So what I'm saying is, it's about like a deep state. When you go to college, everybody's discussing today, this thing is so deep with colleges. And I can say it firsthand, I spent 45 years in it. So it is so deep I don't know the answer to it, but it starts, and it starts at the top of every university I've been at.
It's the money.
It's
It is the money that has corrupted our universities so dramatically, because again, I'll go back to the University of Wyoming, and I graduated from law school there in 1989. And yeah, there was some, and the professors tended to be more liberal than your general public in Wyoming, but they still taught in Wyoming. And my bachelor's degree is in business, and most of them were fairly conservative. You know, you knew who the liberal professors were in law school, but they're nothing compared to what they are today. Today, it is brainwashing. It's a form of propaganda. It's a psyops almost to convince people of things that are not true. And it's what we all know that communism is. The gentleman who wrote the book about it, the fact that one of the worst things about living under communism was that every single day you had to lie. You had to lie that, oh yes, our food is better. Oh yes, our clothing is better. Oh yes, our cars do work better. Oh yes, the empty shelves are a good thing. Oh yes, we are more productive than the United States of America. And he said, every day that I got up, I had to lie to my wife. I had to lie to my kids every day. And he said, it is bone crushing. It is bone crushing when everything that you do is a lie. And that is kind of what some of this is that we are seeing on these university campuses. And, you know, I don't know what the answer is either, but it's got to be parents and students who are just absolutely unwilling to tolerate it anymore. And the federal government has got to get out of. So the big thing, Obamacare was bad, in my opinion. Maybe other people have a different opinion here. But you want to know one of the worst aspects of Obamacare? In Obamacare is where the federal government took over student loans. It was through that bill that the federal government got rid of the entire loan lending program for student loans and deposited in the federal government. So when I was in college, I had private loans to go to college. Obamacare took those away and made it so that you cannot have the private loans. So that is another aspect of Obamacare that was so damaging. That's why Joe Biden says he has the ability to forgive them, because it is federal money. It's not private bank money. It's not money that you go in there, you're paying a private bank for that. It is federal money. That's why he says he can forgive them. But the level of funding through that program, getting federal funds, to your point, getting federal funds to these universities, it isn't even a direct payment of they're writing a check. They're writing a check to the student for $35,000, and that $35,000 or $75,000 or whatever is going to the university. But that's federal money. That's why they've been able to do what they've done with Title IX. That's why they've been able to rewrite Title IX the way that they have. That is what the new regulations are with that. All of these things are interconnected, but it is all the strings that go back to the federal funds, and it all goes back to the Federal Department of Education, which never was created until 1980, and it was not created by Congress, it was created by Jimmy Carter. And that's why it could be abolished if we had anybody who had the guts to do it. Other questions? Do we have any others? I want to make sure I get to everybody, and then I'll come back there. And I'm going to go right here, and then I'm going to go here.
Harriet, it's a simple two-part question. Are you familiar with Hillsdale College?
Yes, I am.
Are there any other colleges like that?
Yeah, I don't know if it's university, and they don't take any federal funds. They don't take any federal funds.
Except any federal or even state funding. Student pays, if you can't pay, they get them a grant.
It is a classic, it is your classic old school education.
Yeah, if you have a chance and you're in Michigan, stop by and visit the Hillsdale. It's well worth it. And I can't be on one second.
Okay, this gentleman right here.
So one quick point and a very quick question. In terms of what the gentleman was saying over there, he's still here. The number is $250,000 or above. That has to, and it comes from a foreign source. That has to be declared to the Department of Education. That number, I helped produce a film called Covert Cash, which we went into that very, very specifically. If anyone wants to see the film, it's free online. It's free. So anyone can watch it. Called covertcash.com. Covert Cash. And you can also go and see how much your university has gotten in funding from a foreign source on the same website. We have a whole database that tracks that. So it's a free resource if anyone wants to use it.
My staff is taking that information down and
I can give you my card later.
Okay.
It's a very robust website. We made the film and it's put it out there for the public. But, you know, and I support so much what you said. I think the crux of an issue is that, you know, everything that's happened till today is water under the bridge. Today, Israelis are facing the possibility of a unilateral attack on it from many different places, from the north, from the west, all these different areas. Of course, we have aircraft carriers coming over and helping, the Israelis do. Let's say, and this goes back to the gentleman's question back here, that there is a substantial attack that's forged against Israel. So in the end of the day, Israel is there and has to defend itself. But with all those aircraft carriers and everything else, an existential threat, what does America do? What would you think America should do under that circumstance?
Well, first of all, we have to continue to replenish the Iron Dome. We have to continue to send them the resources that they're asking for. And to my knowledge, there has not been a request for, there's the $14 billion, but to my knowledge, there has not been a request for boots on the ground. Okay, to my knowledge, Netanyahu has not asked us to do that. We obviously are providing support. That pier, that $230 million pier was an absolute disaster. It not only the terrible waste of money, but just the concept that we would circumvent the leadership of a sovereign nation and attempt to do something like that was shocking to me. But I want to do what Netanyahu and Israel are telling us right now we need to be doing. Crossing the bridge and whether we send troops, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know where I am on that. I have
The tip, we're the spear.
Pardon me?
They're the tip of the spear, we're the spear, right? So at some point, you know, and that's gonna fall on you guys, right? You guys get to declare war, right? So, you know.
Yeah.
I think it's a reasonable question for us to understand how your thought process on.
As I just said, my response is to give Netanyahu the resources that he's asking for. And to my knowledge, he has not asked for the troops. And so I want to give him the resources that he has requested. Do we send troops back into that area of the world? I don't know the answer to that. I really don't know the answer to that. But I do believe the $14 billion that was requested and the underlying resources should have been shifted immediately. And I am very angry with this administration that they withheld it and played games. It wasn't their authority to do it. But the other thing that I do believe is that Congress has to be involved in these decisions.
The Navy has been involved in combat for months
In the Middle East.
in the Middle East.
I think John is here.
Yes,
Okay.
well, that's okay. If there are a couple more questions.
Okay. I think I'll go over here because I haven't asked you, how are you?
Well, how are you?
I'm good.
Good. With respect to the administration not providing the aid that reportedly was promised. Is there two questions? Number one, is there any doubt in your mind that they have not done so? In other words,
Not now. I believe that with what has developed over the last just even couple of days, I think that they recognize that the optics of this would be a disaster. My understanding is that they are trying to get the resources to them, but to Israel, but I don't even know. Yeah, I don't even know necessarily what form that is taking, but they're not slow walking as they have been.
Okay, so the second part is, are you going to investigate the past with respect to this issue? Try to put a view towards it not happening again.
You know, I will ask to find out whether the committees of jurisdiction are in fact doing that. And I'm not trying to fob off your question on somebody else.
You don't have jurisdiction, you don't have.
That's right. And that would not be the committees that I have. That would not be my committees that would be doing that. That would be armed services, most likely. It would be one of those. So I would, we can talk with Mike Waltz. I can find out if what kind of work they're doing to try to make sure that this administration is held accountable and that it doesn't happen
I
again.
would ask that you try to hold the administration accountable.
Okay.
I think I would like you to introduce your
Status things. Okay, well, I do have my staff back here. I have your.
Troy is like- Troy is my legislative director, and Marjorie is my director of operations. And I want you to know, they are the best staff on Capitol Hill.
I have the very best staff on Capitol Hill. I know I shouldn't say it in front of them. But I love working with them. They love Wyoming. They love our agenda and what we're doing. And they have helped to make me a success in a way that I never, ever, ever could have done without them. So if you have questions, if you have needs, if you have issues that you're having with agencies, whether it's the IRS or the VA or any other agency, please contact my staff here in Wyoming and we will try to find a resolution for you.
They said they would leave us some cards.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I want to thank all of you for
Thank
coming, and please stay because Senator Barrasso is waiting outside. But we're not rushing our conversation. I want to thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you. We really do have the backs of Israel. We do. There's a lot of us that do.
Yeah, this is me. These guys are just back to back.
That's how we're happy to be here.
I never. Can I have everyone please? Thank you. Anyone out in the hall, please come in. We do have seats. Seats. Be here. Okay. I want to welcome all of you again, and thank you for coming. And again, I'm Joan Goldfarb, and I think the senator knows I've been doing this a long time, even preceding you. I'm really dating
Not
myself.
before I was born, but just since I before I was.
With our meetings, yes. I want to do a little thank you to Brad, who is the assistant, and Mary, who is the executive director. And they are hosting us as usual and for many, many years, and we're most appreciative. I'm going to give the introduction now, so if anyone wants to come in, please come in now. If it's too hot, okay. Sorry. Do you want to introduce your staff? Well, it would be nice. We've been always.
Okay, you can introduce me first.
All right, well, I'll do it. Okay. Well, I want to thank all of you for joining us, and I'm delighted again to introduce our voice in Washington, D.C., Senator Barrasso. Senator Barrasso is currently serving his 4th term in office and has been a steadfast advocate of the U.S.-Israel alliance throughout his tenure. The senator is the 3rd ranking member in the Senate Republican leadership as chairman of the Senate Republican Conference. In addition to other committee assignments, Senator Barrasso sits on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, an influential role for many of the issues that directly affect the U.S.-Israel relationship. As a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, he has worked to ensure the U.S.-Israel relationship, that it remains strong and enemies of the U.S. and Israel are weakened. Most recently, he co-sponsored a resolution condemning the administration's decision to halt an arms shipment to Israel and legislation that would cut off assistance to entities that give additional rights and privileges to the Palestinian Authority. He's also been an ardent supporter of any efforts to combat and counter Iran aggression and any efforts to impose further limitation on funding of the Iranian regime. Furthermore, throughout the past 10 months, the senator has been an unwavering voice in support of Israel's right to defend itself and reaffirming the strength of the U.S.-Israel relationship. Now, before I turn it over to Senator Barrasso, I want to remind everyone who's gathered here that we are speaking with our senator only about the U.S.-Israel relationship, not Israel's or the United States domestic policies. And I must say, the conversation is off the record and closed to the press. Senator, thank you for your leadership and taking the time to be with us today. I'd like to invite you to give a few brief remarks and then we'll open it up.
Well, thanks so much. Thanks so much for allowing me to join you again. Wonderful Pam Bulin is here, who's been here just about every year. She's from my office in Riverton. She worked for Craig Thomas before me and then Malcolm Wallop before that. So she knows Wyoming and knows the history as well. And then my chief of staff, Dan Koonsman, is here as well from Washington. He worked for Craig when Craig was in the House and now been my chief of staff for the last 12 years. So many of you worked with Amber Bland. I know Cliff, the last 6 or 8 times you've been to the office, we have a chance to visit and then you talk to Amber. I just talked to Amber a few minutes ago. She said to say hi to you and to your long-suffering wife. It's so tomorrow will be 10 months since October 7th. A day where we saw the face of terror in the world and a day that changed the world forever. October 7th in Israel was what 9/11 was in the United States. And I mean, Jerry Behrens is here, who right after 9/11 went back to Iraq and Desert Shield and Desert Storm after being a Vietnam veteran. And we've seen the exact same thing. And we've seen the same thing with people from around the world going to Israel to help. And you had the speaker last night from the Israeli Defense Force and all of the issues. My #1 pollster who we work with in my campaign is dual citizenship, and he was told into action in Washington. So there's been an incredible outpouring of support for the people of Israel, and the support was united and bipartisan right from the beginning. And I just want to read one little, this is from the Daily Wire. Largest turnout ever, 290,000 plus attend massive pro-Israel rally in DC, including the Israeli hostages' families. This is November 14th. You know, they had the big gatherings, and more than 300,000 people are estimated to have attended a pro-Israel rally in Washington, D.C. on Tuesday, including 170 family members of Israelis who were kidnapped by a Palestinian terrorist last month. The day kicked off with Senate Republican Chairman John Barrasso welcoming the hostages' families to a bipartisan event, which included lawmakers from both the House and the Senate. Quote, "We are all standing here in unity with you," said Barrasso. "For the family members, you have seen the face of terror, the horrors, the brutality. We are heartbroken by that. We stand with the people of Israel, and that is very heartfelt. And we wanted to be here to see the faces, to hear the stories, to share the pain, and to make sure that the world never turns its back on the stories or the people, never turns its back on the people of Israel. We want to work with you in every way that we can for a safe return for all of you, of your family members who are currently being held hostage. Thank you for welcome to Washington. We are all brothers and sisters here today." Republican, Democrat, House, and Senate, all there together to welcome these folks to talk about this issue. And as things have moved, The Economist had a piece on this because my concerns are we're not as united. President Biden, I thought, did the right thing, went to Israel, said all the right things. But 6 months later, The Economist has a cover that said Israel alone. And that's the big worry as we're seeing the politicization of what's happening with Israel to the point where the majority leader of the United States Senate went to the floor of the United States Senate and told the prime minister, duly elected prime minister of Israel, get out of the way. Some have called him a war criminal and have tried to interfere with elections in another country. Netanyahu was there a couple of weeks ago in Washington. I had a chance to visit with him twice. That morning, just how divisive this has gotten, that morning were the services for Joe Lieberman. I've been to Israel with Joe multiple times with John McCain and Lindsey Graham and others. And so Bibi was there speaking, Lindsey Graham spoke, Susan Collins spoke, McConnell was there, I was there, Mike Pence, Joe Manchin, and there were only 3 Democrats. Yeah, the 2 Democrats from Connecticut and Tom Carper from Delaware. And none of the others went because of Lieberman's relationship with McCain and some of the positions that he has had. But it is very discouraging to see what has now become divisive. And we're only going to talk about Israeli issues. Shapiro should have been the nominee of Kamala Harris for vice president. He could have helped with Pennsylvania. But why did they not choose him? Why not? Because the party is now being run by the pro-Hamas wing of the party. And that's the tragedy that we're facing now in the country. And why I'm so worried about Israel alone. And that's from where we speak. Lindsey Graham has an editorial today in the Wall Street Journal about the 3 steps to try to keep Iran. And I was with Lindsey Saturday night. We were talking about the editorial, working on it. We were together in South Carolina. Tim Scott got married, first time, age 58. You know, there's hope eternal. But it's what the 3 steps, what we should do, because the sanctions have essentially been lifted from Iran to sell oil to China, going from 300,000 barrels a day, 1.2 million. China gets to buy it at a discount. The tanker loads go to China with the oil. Tankers of cash go back to Iran. Iran uses the money to fund the Houthis and Hamas and Hezbollah. All of those things are happening right now because the administration isn't really holding their feet to the fire. Lindsey talks about additional sanctions, additional punishment on the countries that buy the Israeli oil at a discount, and what we can do with red lines for the advances of Iranian nuclear activities. Because every time I sit down with Netanyahu, talks around McCain, you always say, "How's the neighborhood?" And Netanyahu would talk about it, and he said, but after about 3 seconds, he said, "But about Iran." Everything comes back to Iran and Iran's ability to get a nuclear weapon, which is the great fear. But Iran right now is doing a lot of effort through their proxies. We can talk about Hezbollah, what's happening in the north, as you have this whole area of northern Israel. Basically, you can't get there. It's become a left behind, a forgotten area, if you will. Is the next effort going to be there? How is it that Hamas got across undetected? And for years, every time we come together, we talk about what Israel does right. And it has to do with deterrence by having a strong military, early detection if deterrence doesn't actually work, and then the sites of victory. And I call them the 3 Ds. And the deterrence didn't work on October 7th. Early detection didn't work. And I think it's going to be a complete victory, but we're now tomorrow 10 months into what is more of a drawn out than a decisive 6-day war kind of a victory. So that's what we're facing on the world event. And then in the additional big picture, the Economist cover also says China, Iran, and Russia versus the West. You know, I have concerns, and Jerry is kind of probably the best global thinker on all of these things, having been to several wars and reading about this extensively, working with wounded warriors, is that you can only make weapons so fast. And when we're sending weapons to Ukraine to combat with Russia, and I believe that China's the puppet master here, and we're sending weapons to Israel to do what they need to do against Hamas. And does this just, is our cupboard getting bare? Because when General Milley said the amount of weapons that we're sending to Ukraine that they're using in a month is equal to what we're capable of producing in a year, it does make you wonder how quickly we're being drawn down. And is this just China, the puppet master, using Russia as a wrecking ball in Ukraine to gobble up our resources there, as well as what's happening with Iran in pulling strings directed by China into Israel, so that ultimately China has its opportunity to take Taiwan, with us not being able to mount fully a third front war. So that's the kind of the global overview. And at the same time, with elections in the United States, I just, one other article. The pro-Israel group is getting involved in primaries. And there was one in New York where Congressman Jamal Bowman lost his race there with significant work to take him out as a pro-Hamas anti-Semite. And the second race is today. It was Corey Bush is the one in St. Louis area, another one of the squad. Yeah. And in an effort to try to get her. So it's not like this isn't Republican versus Democrat. This is pro-Israel versus anti-Israel. And I'm so happy to have the student who just spoke. I mean, it is getting to be a real concern for our students. So Mary Barons, when you were in the legislature, you served with Susan Anderson.
Yep.
Susan's grandson, and he's in Rhode Island, raised in the Jewish faith. Mother's Jewish. Susan's son isn't, but they raised him in the Jewish faith, and he's ready for college. National Merit Scholar. Where's he going to go to college? You know, they say most people choose the college on how the weather was when you went on your tour that day to see the college. And he was going to see where he could practice his faith without the threats that we have happening on the universities all across the country. And he's chosen Vanderbilt because of the way that they have handled the anti-Semitism and saying people want to speak, fine, but you're not going to take over the university. Ben Sass, the former senator from Nebraska, who was then president of the University of Florida, did the same thing. I mean, some people really stood up and did it right. Others, sadly, did not. But I think most senators, both parties, were surprised when we talked to students. And well, Bob Diener, getaroom.com, who comes out often with you. He had a fundraising Zoom call with me. And instead of having the parents on who normally write the checks, he had on their kids who are all in college, and each one of them told different stories, some from the East Coast, some from the West Coast, some from Chicago, about what they faced, not just certainly since October 7th, but what they were facing in the lead up, the anti-Semitism that I don't think any of us realized was truly on campus, not to the level it is now, but was there. And I was surprised, so I'm glad you had the student who just talked about that a couple of minutes ago. I think she's ready to go to start college. But these were all students on campuses explaining what they're facing and why it's now a major decision of where students choose to go to college based on the experiences that they want to have to be able to openly practice their faith without not just discrimination, but physical abuse, mental abuse, torture kind of activities that go after them as human beings for their own lives. So I could go on for about an hour, but I think we ought to open it up for advice or recommendations. And I'm not going to have all the answers, but I want to hear what people have to say.
Great questions. And please keep your questions short.
Hey, Steve. How you doing? We were in the first Leadership Wyoming class together.
Some of us did well.
Yeah, you did well. He was a hell of a hockey player at one point. You don't want to get checked by that guy.
Senator, thank you for being here. Congratulations in advance. In January, you'll be chairman of the Senate Energy Committee. And when we restore energy dominance to the United States, you can break Iran again, like Trump did. How do you see that strategy working out? And also, I asked Harriet, can you trust the military for the next 5 months? And if not, what can you do about it?
Well, this is a somewhat domestic question about, do I trust the commander in chief for the next 5 months? Look, I have real problems with decisions that are being made that affect Israel in terms of is Israel getting the weaponry that we have approved, that we have voted for?
or is it a slow walking progress? The same thing happened with Ukraine. I think it was slow walking there to get the weapons that they needed. The specific bombs that Netanyahu was one, and they're different weaponry that you need. You know, what Ukraine needs is different than what we need in Israel right now. But what Hamas and Hezbollah, specific Hezbollah, is able to shoot into Israel, you know, all of the weaponry you have isn't going to be. They can overwhelm our capacity to knock things down. But some of the bombing material that you need to get down to those deep tunnels in the Gaza Strip, and you know, I think our military intelligence thought there might have been 100 miles worth of tunnels there. With what we know, there's over 400 miles. It's bigger than the subway system in New York City. And of course, where it's the deepest is under the hospitals and under the mosques, under the schools. And they use individuals as shields. They use humans as shields. As Netanyahu says, you know, every death but to a citizen in Gaza, you know, is a tragedy. But for Hamas, it's a strategy. If you read Bibi's book called Bibi, and he wrote it when he was out of office in that interim, you know, he said we should never go in to attack into Hamas because they'll draw us in, it'll take long, and we will lose the battle of public opinion because they will go after us all around the world. But after what happened on October 7th, I don't think there was much choice. But he understood it and he wrote about it and he saw what would be happening now. So there's more decisive and quickly we can get this finished. Better, but you have to eliminate Hamas. You can't let the germ there to continue. So I think they've been slow, even though we've approved some of the weaponry that to get there, and they don't. I said, well, it'll hurt humanitarian efforts. The amount of money that has gone not for humanitarians, but diverted by Hamas to go for weaponry and building of the tunnels and the missiles, and they got factories building missiles deep down, 10 stories below hospitals, you know, to disrupt the tunnels. And there are what 116 still, Cliff, about 116 still hostages being held.
Well, 150, but according to yesterday, maybe 50 alive.
So that's all the question. But you don't want to just start saying, well, we're going to take out all the tunnel system because you're worried about where those hostages are too. Some are U.S. citizens, and we've had a complete failure to go after them in the way we should have. Yeah.
How would you define U.S.'s ironclad support of Israel? What does that mean?
Well, I mean, something different to me, and everybody knows something has a different meaning of that. And the president gets to decide what weapons get shipped and at what time frame and what scale. The Iron Dome, they can get overwhelmed easily. Give more. I've been down to Sderot and been at the Iron Dome there, and I've been up to the northern border, just south of Lebanon, and what we have there. What Hezbollah and what Hamas have in terms of weaponry, and specifically Hezbollah, can overwhelm that. So what is an ironclad? When do you actually attack Iran? One of Lindsay's, I think, point 2 is that if any attack from Hezbollah is considered an attack from Iran. I think he compared it to the JFK and the Cuban Missile Crisis, as saying when Kennedy said any attack from Cuba is an attack from Russia. So the different, how do you?
I mean, it's not the same Democratic Party as JFK, though.
In many ways,
it is.
In many ways, it's not the same Democratic Party as JFK. And I'm just going one domestic issue. I have a picture hanging in my office in DC. John Kennedy in Laramie, Wyoming, giving a speech to your points on resources. It was part of his conservation tour. And I have the line from the speech in there, the plaque with him talking at the field house. Mike Sullivan was there that day. And he said, we have to maintain a living balance between man's actions and nature's reactions, which meant, and he talked about energy development. That's a different party today. It just says, leave it in the ground, no energy, no oil, no gas, no coal, boom. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, not to get into Ukraine very much, but if we walk away from Ukraine, how does Israel not, how do we not think that that's a possibility? How do we know that it's ironclad?
Yeah.
How do we not,
Yeah.
I mean, there are senators voting against Ukraine, right? How do you?
The senators voted on a 4-piece bill that had Ukraine, Israel, Taiwan, and border wall money in it, with the border money spent to smooth the flow of illegal immigrants into the country rather than to stop the flood. So people can make a reason that when they put a bill up like that with 4 parts, you can always find something that you like and something you don't.
A central piece of that, and again, not to get too great, but how do we know that, we will stick, that people will stick to them?
You don't know. How do you know? How do you? People thought they were pretty safe on October 6th. People thought in New York thought they were pretty safe on 9/10. When the day Jeff Immelt took over GE, and GE was the big powerhouse. I mean, the things, when I talk to high school kids, I said, look, there's a book, you don't need to read the book, you just need to know the title. It's called Inevitable Surprises. Every day at night, I try to jot down, what was the inevitable surprise of today? What would I have never believed when I woke up that happened today? And every day there's something. Now, some of it's big, like October 7th, and some of it's not as big, but every day there's something. I don't know how you can do that. Now, what Biden said when he was in Israel, right after October 7th, I thought was just perfect. Yeah, and most of the senators in a very bipartisan way went and watched the video. Because Hamas, they had their GoPros on and they're with their families, and they had their cell phones, and they were documenting all of this stuff because they were so proud of it. And they haven't shown these films to people, but they had all of this, and the ambassador to Israel came, brought the film in. I sat with Elizabeth Warren, Ted Cruz, Chuck Schumer, 55 of us sat there and watched the film, and we watched a Hamas, and they aren't dressed in uniforms. I mean, they're just like you, guys just kind of, you can't tell them apart when they head back. And they only showed 139 deaths in that 45 or 50-minute video of the 1,300 and some that died. I had never before seen a man have his head chopped off by somebody else with a garden hoe. I mean, think about that. How can you not be moved to that and say, these people almost died? Who could do that? How can you allow that to happen and continue to foment that kind of anger and hatred? That's not a human being that does that to somebody else. To see these babies being grabbed from their mother and shot. And it was distressing and disturbing. I've never seen that many senators walk out of a room and nobody could talk. I mean, normally they got a lot to say when senators walk out of a room. Except things just very solemn and sad. So but I don't know what you consider ironclad anything in the world anymore. Yeah.
Iran may be within a few weeks of having crude nuclear devices. Israel can certainly strike Iran in many respects. It's demonstrated that, but it's unclear to me and unlikely that they could dig out the deeply buried facilities with what they have. Is there any prospect that the United States would be prepared to assist that kind of action, or what otherwise should the United States undertake?
Yeah, well, you're right that they may be buried so deep that the mother of all bombs can't get to where they're doing with the centrifuges or weaponizing the nuclear material. That may be the case. US and Israel have done the training missions with the interoperative, the fueling, the mid-air fueling, because I mean, the distance to fly from Israel into Iran, where you would do the bombing and get back, you can't really do it in a single tank of fuel. So they need to do that, but it may be too late, even with the bombs, because you need to have the tonnage to go through it. You need a target, you need to go where. And this is the problem for those of us who didn't want the first Iranian deal, the palace, all the money that went to them, that just funded the Houthis and Hamas and the Hezbollah. Wyoming has been involved in that. We had 140 soldiers, and I went to Djibouti with them earlier this year. And Djibouti, if you want to Google it, it starts with a D, not a J, Djibouti. But it's, it's on the coast of Africa, and it's where the Houthis are firing. That's still Iranian funded. The Houthis are sending the missiles into that area where the Gulf of Aden comes down into the Red Sea, which is interfering with ships. This is an area really just 9 miles wide there. China is building its first port. It's not Chinese-based big port right there in Djibouti, right where the ships make the turn. The ships now have to go around the south of Africa instead of coming up through the Suez Canal, because they're just targets for the Houthis. And we had 140 soldiers there, including 4 C-130s from the Wyoming National Guard. So we're in the middle of this fight, and it's real. And Iran with a nuclear weapon with one is, to me, worse than Russia with 1,000. So yeah.
I'll take us back to foreign relations. when you look at this current administration in particular, contrasted to the Trump administration, it's nothing but mud right now. And, you know, I kind of just observe this because they don't care about the country. They don't like this country. They hate it. So how can you have anything that's clear in the world when you hate your own country? You want to actually destroy it.
It's a different view of the world. It's a different view of the world that the two parties have right now, and I won't get into all but in terms of, you know, open borders, in terms of, you know, who's coming in and the threats of the terrorists, all of those activities that are happening right now, in terms of making us more dependent on others and not using our own resources. Steve asked about energy independence. You know, energy is a long-term weapon. You know, you want to have energy, you want to have energy strength, but we have an administration that wants to go to Venezuela, wants to go to Saudi Arabia, wants to go to others. You know, before Russia invaded Ukraine, Trump was asking, Biden was asking Russia for more energy. So, and I want to produce it here. And that's we just had a big fight in the Senate. The White House doesn't like a bill that we got out of the Energy Committee, which is 15-4, with Bernie Sanders against it, Corona from Hawaii, and Ron Wyden from Oregon against it, because it's been the Frankenstein monster for fossil fuels, is what it's been called. It said it's going to cut back the climate fight by a generation. At the same time, in the global issue, in terms of Israel and around the world, AI has a big part of this. You know, Xi in China said, whoever controls AI, he did a speech like in 2014, whoever controls AI controls the world. So China continues to put the energy on the system because you need AI, these supercomputers need massive amounts of energy, And the energy needs in the United States in the next 5 years is going to be like adding an entire new California to the grid, just because of data centers and AI, electrification of vehicles. Electric vehicles aren't going to make it here to Wyoming. I mean, they're just not going to work. Some people are going to buy them in California, New York, where it's easy to charge, perhaps easier to charge. But there's this huge increased demand for energy. And we're not having it. I mean, the FERC says we're not, the energy regulatory commissions, the reliability commissions, all say we're not going to do it. And it's because of the climate gods, rather than the intellectual folks who can do the math and say we need all the energy. So there's a very different thing, because they're going to save the planet. So Joe Lieberman service, first speaker, Al Gore, because it was Gore Lieberman 2000. Yes. So Gore was there. I had so much respect and admiration for Joe Lieberman. He was engaged like me as a warrior on climate, and yesterday was the hottest day in the history of the planet. This is the guy's funeral service. He's talking about his lecture on climate. Lindsay at least kept it on Israel. He said the worst place in the world is to be at the Wailing Wall when John McCain has this little slip of paper and he's putting it into the Wailing Wall, and you're between John McCain and the Israeli press. He said, the next thing you know, I'm on the floor and I'm wailing at the Wailing Wall. So, then Bibi got up and talked and sense to all of us. So it was an astonishing thing what happened to the global world.
Yeah, my point is, if you care about the country, you're going to make different decisions.
Well, yes, and I'm not going to say it, so you would never vote for Kamala Harris. Next. Yeah, Cliff. Oh, I was hoping Cliff would ask me. You know, he's so shy and so bashful. He's written a book or two. How many books have you written?
On Israel 3.
All right, so you can learn a lot from this guy.
Yes.
That includes the new one, but not the one that's coming. I'm going to ask you a question where I think there's been both bipartisan failure and there's an opportunity for bipartisan success, and get your thoughts on how we can leverage money. As you know, the U.S. gives Egypt a ton of money, more than $1 billion, maybe $2 billion a year, and they've been doing it for probably 30, 40 years. The biggest problem in Gaza is weapons coming from Egypt.
Yeah, through the Rafah crossing. Yeah.
Right, and the Philadelphia crossing. Over the next few months, any success in Gaza is going to require blocking that crossing. And whatever happens, whatever Israel does negotiate, it's going to involve Egyptian involvement. Is there any chance the Foreign Affairs Committee, what leverage can be put to put strings on the money that's given to Egypt? I'm not asking to not give it, but to look at it, requirement.
Well, first, for those of us between the House and the Senate, in the House, it's a foreign affair. In
Sorry.
the Senate, it's a relationship. It's not-
He's not gonna hesitate to correct me.
Joni Ernst from the Senate, Armed Services is gonna be he's talking to LCC this week. Same thing with Mubarak. Before that, I've been to the Ralph Crossing, where you kind of were playing whack-a-mole and, trying to stop what's going through. That was always the question of would Egypt allow some of the folks from the Hamas area, from Gaza, head in?
Right.
They're mortal enemies as well, so you understand the issues there. So, yeah, I think it's part of the discussion.
They're making a ton of money.
Yeah.
Attacking the money,
Yeah.
the weapons that
Yeah.
are coming in.
Yeah. And in the additional bigger picture, is there a way to expand on the Abrams Accord and bring Saudi Arabia in on all of this? And can they get some things done to get the prisoners, the hostages released as well? So, yeah, people are looking, there are actually reasonable people on both sides of the aisle trying to find some solutions here. And my concern is that the other party is now beholden to the Hamas wing of the part who are in the United States. And the presidential election here could turn on the two-state solution. And it's not the two-state solution in Israel, it's two states here in the fight for the electoral college. Because of the number of people, the small number of that would be voting in a state, which could go one way for Trump in 1 year, and one for Biden in 2020. Before we get somebody that hadn't asked a question, we'll get back. Go ahead.
Yeah, one question which was brought up earlier with the congressman relating to Congress's power to wage war. What is your view on authorizing groups to get involved if this war goes hot? And obviously Air Force will first, but what's your view on being drawn into it?
Well, having been there now for, she said 4 terms, and 1 term was 1.5 years, and 1 term was 4 years, but I've been there for a while. I have less and less, and we've seen this over the years, the authoritative nature of a president in terms of executive actions, in terms of activities, in terms of sending troops. Biden did more than Trump, Trump did more than Obama, Obama did more than Bush did more than Clinton, Clinton. You can kind of work your way all the way back to when I talked about John Kennedy. Each president has done more with executive actions and with presidential authority. So it does seem that, they want to really act, they act when we're out. We're going to be out for the month. We're going to be out through we're not back until September. The Congress isn't back until September. We have a Democrat convention coming up in a week and a half. They act then, actions are different when Congress is there than when we're not. And that's a lot in terms of what the press covers. We're not, we're going to be out most of October and we'll run up to the election. It's a matter of how much attention anything gets. And so much is happening. The leadership of the Senate, we sat down in McConnell's office when we got back from the convention. And he said, so in the 9 days since we last sat at this convention, former president was actually shot on a stage while being protected by the Secret Service. One of our colleagues is now the nominee for vice president. The other president and the nominee of the other party has been taken down. His vice president has now gotten the nomination. This is only 9 days that we've been away. And one of our colleagues from New Jersey has been found guilty of selling state secrets for gold bars.
Yeah.
So you have all of this stuff that happened in 9 days. So to think, well, Congress is going to pass this, and she has my record right. I have like 9 pages of different things and things I've co-sponsored and bills we brought out and resolutions and all of this stuff. And the big picture of how the world works right now, a lot less of that matters to the degree of who's in the office, who's sitting behind the desk, who's making the decisions, who's the Secretary of Defense, who's the Secretary of State, and who's the President of the United States.
But would you support it?
Would I support?
Troops defending it?
Well, this guy's videoing, and I'm not going to say that.
Oh, I didn't know he was videoing, and I hope no one is.
I turned it off.
Well, we're off the record, but I'm getting videoed here, and I'm very concerned whenever I talk, and I'm not going to make a commitment like that.
I appreciate it.
Okay. Yeah.
Jared Kushner's book talks about Arab countries not allowing Hamas leaders right now, and so they're going to let them in their country. So. I didn't know we weren't supposed to usually get some good stuff.
I'm sorry, they're having a comment. I'm trying. So Jared Kushner's book and say,
It says that the other countries won't let Hamas leave Israel if they don't want them. So in my mind.
to go to Egypt.
Any.
Yeah, okay.
So in my mind, the only thing that they could do would be to eradicate.
Yeah, well, that's what I've been calling for, the eradication of Hamas.
Sounds like it is for me.
Yeah.
Do you see any prospects for a border solution? As you're aware, there was a bipartisan agreement that unraveled as the election started to heat up. What do you think the prospects are for a resolution to our border problem?
Sure.
And relating to that, do you see it makes sense to separate that from support for Ukraine as well as Israel? Because as you know, there was this four-part proposal to Taiwan, Israel,
Ukraine.
right, and the border, and that didn't work. Do you think it's going to work after the election? What do you, as a member of the leadership,
Sure. Yeah, I'll tell you.
hope for, and what do you think is realistic?
Yeah. Joe, can I answer a question about the US border? There's a question about the US border. It's a domestic issue.
For you, yes.
Okay, thank you. So the difference is when Trump was president, no law has passed since Al Simpson in Missouri in 1992 passed a border law. Nothing has changed at all. It's just how the administration, getting back to our point, how the administration interprets that law. So Trump would say the border was secure when he left office, and I believe that in terms of the numbers, very few. But Biden comes in, signs 94 executive orders in the first 100 days, and 10 million people have come in illegally. We can pass all the laws you want. We could pass a bipartisan bill, we could pass a Assembly bill. If they're not going to enforce the law says they're supposed to be doing oil drilling on public lands, but they haven't had an auction for public lands oil since they've been in the White House. It's been 3.5 years. The law says a lot of things. They said, well, sue us. So you can sue them, and then it takes a while to get their way through the court, which gets back into the three branches of government still exists. Congress, when it's this close, you don't have a big swing, you don't have a lot to be done. They can make things happen. So the executive does their orders. And if you don't like it, go to the courts, but it can take 3 years to work its way through the system to find somebody that has standing. The lawyers have standing, and then has to go to a lower court and then get to the Supreme Court. And so that's becoming a way to get to the ultimate thing, but too long, takes too long. Justice delayed, justice denied. Yes.
I appreciate everything the senator has said. I do have a question. The senator said at least 2 times that he supports the eradication of Hamas.
Yeah.
Netanyahu went into this war saying that we have to eradicate Hamas. I've always been confused, and I'd like to get your perspective, because eliminating a Hamas is basically an impossibility, especially while you're on an ongoing war, which are a byproduct of that is create more people who are ideologically aligned with Hamas. So if we're going to set the bar, we're going to try to destroy Hamas, are we not setting a bar that's actually impossible? If setting a bar that's actually impossible, is that a bar whatsoever?
Well, to your point, that's what Bibi wrote about in his book.
I understand
Bibi.
that.
So, and he's the prime minister, so I'm not going to second guess him, but that's what essentially he had said there. And when you make a case that as long as there is a nuclei of Hamas folks who can then go out and recruit others, you actually avoid something like this in the future. I'm sure everybody here has been to Israel. I've not been there as many times as many of you have. It is a small country. It is, the Red Sea. I used to kind of growing up listening to reading the Bible. The Red Sea. Jerry goes fishing in a lake outside of Casper that's bigger than the Red Sea, right? It's just not that big. It'd be like people from Casper shooting at Glen Rock back and forth when you take a look at the, from the and of course you see the Golan Heights. You never get back to Golan Heights. I mean, it's so small. And now the weaponry that Hezbollah has and Hamas has, it's not just the volume, it's how far they can go and the directional capacity. That's a lot different than the first time I was in Sderot and there were shelling going on now, and 94% of them went into the Mediterranean or went out into a field someplace. You have to be much more accurate and have much more of a shielding approach. Yeah. So I'm not going to second guess what they're doing. I mean, they're having enough discussions in Israel about how you go, when you call it quits, when you stop, what it looks like afterwards. Bibi talked about a lot of that during his joint session of Congress discussion. I don't know how many of you listened to him about a week and a half ago when he was in Washington. And he talked about what it looks like the day after. But, you know, I mean, they're kind of the three phases, ready to go in with the invasion, the elimination of Hamas, and then the slowdown, where you're just going after different cells, trying to clean out what's down in the tunnels, and then ultimately rebuilding and who's in charge.
Senator.
Question would be.
This gentleman did want to ask a question.
I can't remember.
I am told by your people that we only have one more question. Is that right?
I don't know. Well, whatever time wise, whatever you do.
Well, I have time, but we need to take you.
Well, we have another group that I'm supposed to be addressing. Okay, yeah, go ahead, yeah.
Senator, thanks for being here. I have a two-part question. Number one, what do you think the Iranian response is going to be to the two recent assassinations?
Yeah.
And number two, what do you think the United States response will be should another barrage occur similar to the previous one?
Yeah. Well, and with this administration, I think we have a tentative president, and he is very concerned about escalation. That's why Ukraine didn't get the weapons they needed right away. He was afraid it would escalate to nuclear war. He's been slow and doesn't want to escalate. He's just timid on those things, and people realize that. There was a funeral for a young man right down the street here. One of the 13 folks killed, Riley McCullum, killed in Afghanistan on the day of which I was with Trump in Afghanistan Thanksgiving the year before the presidential race, and the way that we withdrew showed a significant weakness on the part of the United States that invited, in my opinion, aggression. And you saw it with China, you saw it with Russia, you saw it with Iran, you saw it around the world. Aggression against a weakened United States and a weakened president who is not going to stand up and fight. Politically, if you watch, people say, hey, if Trump would still be president, Ukraine would have never been invaded by Russia. We'd still be in Afghanistan. We had to stay behind force 5,000 soldiers there. Nobody had lost their life in a couple of years. But that really demonstrated to the world a weak president and a weak nation. And the way we responded, we've been terrible. So I think that just invites Iran to be more aggressive. It invites others to be more aggressive against us, which may have an impact or may not on the upcoming presidential election, because there are other issues. There's the border, there's the economy, there's inflation, there's the cost of groceries. Lots of things will come into that discussion.
This could present an opportunity for the United States to go after the Iranian nuclear facilities.
It could. I don't see this president doing it. That's just, especially if he's, well, whether it happens during the 16 hours when the staff says he's just not as alert as he is.
Our senator has given us a lot of his time, and he is. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. Good to see you all. Thank you for coming. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks you guys for coming. Appreciate it.
Where were you telling
Semi-retired. Out here, my favorite place. I may not be gay, but I'm. So
Women are not.
So how you doing? And I was. Took pictures last night.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw it. And I had a fax on it's causing. And you're saying, here, how come they can't see them? Well, they can't. You know. And so we just. Can't be certain, because there isn't any truth in this. They've given up on it. No. And we call it now virtual reality. But it's actually, yeah. No, I'm glad you don't want it, because now the view is that if the camera over the internet, it's really. Some evidence. You know, Bob speaks. It's. No way. Yeah, not much different. I don't know if I hear you on some of the other stuff. Like, a bridge from another. He does have a very strong one. I think it's I completely There's fortunately, you're still saying the job. So there are. Wandering in the desert. None of those people. Very first, why you say these things? Got it. I let it make because they we fully wipe that generation out. This is what yeah. I got decision you have because the law couldn't say so the law shows us. Oh, right. Yeah. And they still have to do it's a picture of risk and love and trust and I think it's a little different. I think that never mind with our marriage. It's not like the whole context of scripture. You're not spend 60 years studying, so we love that. Everybody has a religion. There hasn't been much trying to think where to start. Atheist started. Think of a faith that's well. Exactly. Everybody's religious. Have fun with it. They say to me, God, that's not sick. I say, look around the room. They say, he's not here. I say, go outside. So they go outside. They come back in. I say, well, did you see God? No, I didn't see him out there either. I said, how do you know that when you were out, he didn't come in here? It's all religion. Everybody has a belief system. I do have my own. And if you look at people's faces before some of them die. We deal with this all the time. I'm involved with the Arctic. I know. I'm chairman of the board. So we got to meet them, we got to watch that. There's a lot of good stuff.
Our people look at the size and ours look at the complexity of mathematics and not something for organized there. See, I'm having long stranded evidence all over the place. 565. Hey, nice to meet you. See that? Yes, I have a here. Have you seen it? No, I. That's just a good product. 100 years to sell it. Constitution of it. It's all been thought Christendom, and Mount Sinai was in the Sinai Peninsula. But a lot of us have all the evidence now that it's a great. Matter of fact, the Saudis are building.
Yeah, I read read that book, Blood and Oil.
And I've got 3 friends who have been to that. So that's why.
Where they?
Have a rock from that.
It's got the rock.
College in Missouri. What is a retired. Texas. Well, they got there. It's not like it's now listen, Saudi, they all got all these guys from visas to go in that place, and the Saudis are building laws to take people, let them go, because it's not just split rock. It's a mountain, it's totally black.
20-30.
It's granite. You can smell everything. So you did.
I just saw a sign.
Because we're the idea. What the Bible says, the Bible says that Gideon was in. So. I said, I hate this. Enjoy it. Nice meeting
The question is, right, Brian Mark, that's my, song, right? Like sites like that. It's so easy to. When did you? Simplest thing.
I think some of the. And I know, because I got contacts now, these counties are, you could be decapitated in 5-10 years.
What college?
Yeah, I don't understand. Like this Terry. So now you can get a visa.
Yes.
To go to the Chamber of Laws.
He's skeptical.
Springs, you're skeptical.
What's, so this is a song?
What's the song? If then, so what is one of I asked myself. Those who are believers are already believers. Those who are not believers are not being convinced by the evidence outside. So if we prove it, then what? What's the down?
Just stated it.
Now, Bob was
We can't change somebody to logic or argument.
You wanna sit down and
That's a
have
New
coffee,
Testament
he's the guy that.
precedent. We look at doctors, but I agree with you. That's my view is, and God himself can change it. Well, he does tell us.
He does give evidence.
Well, I
Incredible evidence.
And God used it.
That was around.
Certain offices were signed
like.
And
And so some of it, I think,
it's only gonna help.
So we did have to fleet films and
Itself.
towards.
It might be, but
True.
but you don't have to get up. One should not want to fallacy.
You're signing equal. Or thinking.
United up the revelation.
We're thinking about, you're thinking about these kinds of things.
No, I've seen some how they're affecting our.
Like, line.
No, I'm not.
They were 4 or 5 or 100 minutes.
I don't have a television.
I really told you.
All I had to do was.
And now all of a sudden, it's like our, we like to go to hundreds of buildings. It's changing our chronology.
I do. That's the only time I've been a long time.
And it's stuck in our side. So it's not a debatable thing.
We were in Mexico, and we were all with the pyramids. Can you imagine living those things, and then they're gonna take your life?
See, if you give me your card, I'll send you a picture.
I've got his card, Don.
Yeah.
I'm faster than you.
That's me, yes. Good. I used to be a movie producer, so that was my film.
Also,
Don will get you in,
he didn't produce that one.
Don will get you into the art.
He's done a lot of stuff exposing Islam, like pre-ISIS.
Yeah.
Stuff, so he's been
Look at that.
producing.
So he's ran out of
the UN and Congress, it's all pre-ISIS and then post-ISIS. And then he started a, private open source intelligence network. Now he hunts domestic terrorists, school leaders and bad guys. Built an amazing organization for the last, gosh, right, only 17 years. Yeah, he's got like.
Only one of the 3 speakers, saying today, God, but there are a lot of reasons.
Oh, yeah.
And many is not that popular. First, he's got a lot of popularity of power, but the church is growing, it's strong.
Yeah, that's a possible solution. It's actually a possible solution. It's one of the ones I see on the table.
I got the testimony of one guy, he's been there 3 times in the videos.
Yeah,
I wonder how he did it.
So I've been bringing out those videos, but through my work.
And
it's a
got
lot of
lots
stuff.
of
Yeah. Yeah. We'll chat.
So.
He's an Edna, I'm here
When
for
you
a week and a half.
have read Revelation, you know.
Other than Dallas, I'm not going to jump to that to Dallas. But,
He went on there.
going to that, whatever.
Don't, you're outside of that, but Yeah, it's like,
It's,
so,
413-7.
yeah, so mine is.
Now, it's Richard Green.
I have to go back to Richard Green.
I'm Richard Green.
Get my son together.
You know, co-founder
Yeah.
of Yeah, I guess that should be more clear.
I know, so it's like,
Yeah.
or the kind
Yeah,
of,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
like someone like him, you know, he's just.
Oh, my friend.
Yeah, so I'm like, I'm like, okay, I gotta study. I got my drum kit. Now, you got.
Before they were active, boom.
And
Trying to get the law
and
enforcement.
build
Go ahead
up,
and
seeing,
interrupt.
if we build it, it sounds, I wrote
Yeah.
a song called.
Yeah, it's kinda
This country called America. And,
We were instrumental.
and it's all about.
Perhaps hundreds of schools.
I really school shooting.
Yeah,
And,
synagogue shooting.
and you know, got lost in light.
Yeah, yeah, the government has a hard time tracking
But
online
it changed, it took me a year to kind of
because
see
of
it settle.
legal
going.
reasons. Since we're civilians,
So now.
then we have no issue whatsoever. So we can give them an information, they're able to act on it.
You have to get a good. Yes, the key. And so, but that, you have to have a song now. Don't put it.
He's in Florida.
on a song.
Well,
You're not gonna change
we are-
it. You got a problem, the process of fighting.
Well,
Because
also-
no one's gonna